Welcome on board the Newstrack. I'm Rahul Kanwal. The Rafale fighter jets have finally made their landing at the Ambala airbase. But in real, tangible terms, just how much of a force multiplier are they for the Indian Air Force and for India's comprehensive national power? That's my top focus on the Newstrack tonight. Over the past few months, India has faced a military conflict, first with Pakistan and now with China. On the Newstrack tonight, I'll be joined by highly respected former chiefs of the Indian Air Force, Army and Navy as we look at what we need to do beyond the symbolism, beyond the hype. It's not just these 5 Rafale fighter jets that are landing. Can we use this moment laced with so much symbolism to try and increase our military capabilities and to catch up with long pending upgradations? We'll look at that in great detail. Here are the headlines we're tracking on the Newstrack tonight. Prime Minister Modi welcomes India's game-changer fighter jets with a Sanskrit shlok. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says those who threaten India's territory must be warned. Riya Chakrabarti moves Supreme Court wants the Sushant suicide probe to be moved out of Bihar to Mumbai. Sushant's family lawyer alleges that their complaints about Riya in February were ignored by the Mumbai police. Home Ministry comes out with Unlock 3.0 guidelines. Gyms to reopen from the 5th of August. No night curfew from next month. Modi government unveils new education policy after 34 years. Students up to the 5th standard to be taught in their mother tongue. UGC and Technical Educational Council are merged. India today accesses first look of the Ram Mandir in 3D. Politics over the Bhumi Pujan event rages on. Congress slams Temple Trust for not inviting party leadership for the ceremony. It was the much-awaited touchdown that India had long been waiting for. 5 Rafale fighter jets finally arriving on Indian soil, accompanied by 2 Sukhoi 30s from the Al Dhafra in Abu Dhabi, where the Rafales halted overnight after taking off from France on Monday. The fighters' flight into Indian skies was nothing less than a visual spectacle.
A long-awaited moment. Indian Rafales receive a thunderous welcome after touchdown at the Ambala airbase at 3:14 p.m. on Wednesday. The 5 multi-role combat jets greeted with a water salute as they landed. They were received by Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhadauria. The first batch of 5 Rafales, comprising 3 single-seater and 2 twin-seater aircraft, entered the Indian airspace at 1:25 p.m. They were welcomed by Indian Navy warship INS Kolkata, deployed in the Arabian Sea. A brief conversation between Group Captain Harkirat Singh and INS Kolkata, an indigenous Indian destroyer, was later released to the media.
Indian Naval Warship Delta 63, welcome to the Indian Ocean.
Naval Warship Delta 63, Arrow Leader, many thanks. Most reassuring to have an Indian warship guarding the seas.
Arrow Leader Delta 63, may you touch the sky with glory. Happy landings.
Delta 63, Arrow Leader, wish you fair winds. Happy hunting over and out.
They were then escorted by 2 Sukhois, 30 MKIs. Flying at a speed of over 1,300 km per hour, the Rafales reached Mumbai airspace at 1:42 p.m. and in an hour they reached Agra. The 5 fighter jets took off from Merinac Air Base in southern France on July 27th and had a brief stopover at Al Dhafra Air Base in UAE. they will now be stationed in Ambala, where they will join the 17th Squadron of the IAF, also known as the Golden Arrows. The fighter jets will be formally inducted into the Indian Air Force in August in a mega event. Bureau Report, India Today.
The one question that's in the minds of many who are watching at this time, I'm certain, is with the Rafales now stationed at Ambala Air Base, will they be or can they be deployed in Ladakh if the need arises? How soon will these new fighter jets be operationalized? And importantly, how do they compare with China's J-20? Shivarur decodes this for you.
India's public has one question above all. Will the Rafales play a role in Ladakh? Like all things military, it's a complex answer. So stay with us as we take you through it step by step. Question 1. Will the Rafales be deployed in Ladakh? First things first, the Rafales will be based at Haryana's Ambala, which as you can see is 430 kilometers from Ladakh, which may seem like a lot, but it's a very short distance in supersonic fast fighter jet terms and can be covered very quickly. More importantly, the Rafale's range and its combat radius is a staggering 1700 kilometers, which means the aircraft and its weapons are a direct threat to all zones covered by that circle, which very much includes eastern Ladakh, Chinese-controlled Aksai Chin, Tibet, Pakistan and POK. Question number 2. Can Rafales operate from Ladakh? The answer to that question is a big yes. In fact, one of the India-specific enhancements on the Rafale is a modification of the fighter's twin-jet engines, allowing them to operate at extreme cold temperatures of the high-altitude air bases like Leh. Question number 3. Don't Indian Air Force pilots need time to train? The Indian Air Force has clearly stated that its pilots are fully operational on the Rafale and its advanced weapon systems. And while the jets can always be deployed where and when necessary, specific mission familiarization has actually already begun. Since June, Indian pilot trainees in France have specifically been flying simulated combat profiles mirroring missions over Ladakh, with true depictions of terrain and deployments. The Rafale combat simulators and training equipment allow pilots to load scenarios of choice and fly missions in a highly realistic artificial intelligence setting. While this can only be the next best thing to actual flights, it's an indication of a move to get combat ready quickly. Question 4. How will China react to the Indian Rafales? While pilots will spend time stretching their wings and discovering their combat qualities, the jets will already have a psychological effect across the border. Every time the adversary spots an aircraft on the Indian side, they will assume it's the Rafale with all its advanced long-range weaponry, and that itself can have an effect on any potential battle. The belief that India will always put its best foot forward in a combat scenario could have a deterrent effect. Question 5. Is the Rafale better than Chinese jets? While the Chinese Air Force has capable aircraft and in large numbers, the Rafale currently outclasses them in all parameters, including combat radius, range, weaponry, and very importantly, in terms of electronic warfare. China's most advanced jet, the 5th generation J-20 stealth fighter, should theoretically be a superior aircraft, but without combat experience like the Rafale, and China likely unwilling to expose its jet to Indian sensors, the advantage stands eroded for now. But the Chinese jet is still a reminder that India still doesn't have a true stealth fighter aircraft yet. And finally, can 5 Rafales make a difference? Well, the 5 Rafales arriving are just the first batch, with more aircraft to arrive in installments for a total of 36 jets by 2023. And while there can be no replacement for sheer numbers, it's also important to note that the Rafale is an enormously capable weapons platform, and even a handful of these jets, flying with other Indian Air Force jets in combat packages, could pack a serious deterrent and offensive punch. Bureau Report, India Today.
So we've seen the hype, now let's get to brass tacks. How much of a force multiplier are these new Rafale fighter jets in tangible terms? To what extent do they enhance India's comprehensive national military power? What more needs to be done from here on, not just with the 36 Rafale that we'll have? Remember, in 2002, the Indian Air Force had 42 squadrons. That's now down to 30. In 2022, the projection is that the Indian Air Force squadron strength would crash even further to 26. So we have lots of problems on our hands and we need to start resolving some of them. Joining me on this special edition of the Newstrack are 3 highly respected chiefs of the Indian Army, the Navy and the Air Force. I want to welcome first, since this is the big day for the Indian Air Force, Air Chief Marshal S. Krishnaswamy, former Chief of Air Staff. With us also on this broadcast is one of India's most respected military generals, General Bikram Singh, former Chief of the Indian Army. Admiral Suresh Mehta is a highly respected former Chief of the Indian Navy. So I want to go across to Air Chief Marshal Krishnaswamy as someone who's commanded and led the Indian Air Force. What do you make of these 5 Rafale fighter jets, 23 years after the Sukhoi first started landing into India, finally coming to Ambala? How much of an accretion in India's fighting capabilities, in the Air Force's fighting capabilities, do you believe these Rafale to be?
There are 2 parts to it, to this jubilation. One is that we have spent, can you hear me, Rahul?
I hear you, strength 5, sir.
Yeah, there are 2 parts to this so-called jubilation. The first part is that we struggled for about 15 years to get the Rafale in, and it is very, very tough. And by then, many hands are chained over, the chiefs chained, deputy chiefs chained, and so on, so forth. But the files got thicker and heavier, and finally we got it. And I don't think anywhere, any force in the history had to go to Supreme Court as to take so-called to be examined on certain aspects of the aeroplane. So it is a jubilation after all this, and I feel greatly relieved, and I feel very happy about it, because it all started somewhere in my time. And the other part of it is that, of course, it's a beautiful machine. It's wonderful, and sometimes professionally I feel it's good that we delayed, because now what the aircraft carries now is far better than what earlier on what we had envisaged.
Chief Marshal Krishnaswamy, we are seeing so many reports about how the process of operationalizing these Rafales is being expedited. Now, if we press the pedal as much as we can, how soon can these Rafale, and I'm simplifying it just so that everyone gets the context, if there were to be confrontation with China, how many weeks, months from now do you think the Rafale will be worthy of being deployed in a fight if required?
You see, in certain roles on which our guys have been trained and or operational coming from France, those they can take on straight away. That is, straight away means give a few days or a week or 10 days till, the ground crew settle down. I think they are in quarantine for the moment. Possibly they are, I'm not too sure. So for them to get settled down and open the toolboxes, and I believe that they can get onto a, typically, for example, air defense mission. And it's a very straightforward on which these pilots are very, very experienced. And all that happens is slightly different tactics, maybe a strategy. They can try this out, like with the Sukhoi 30s or any other. and get their hand in it, and they can go on. I would say a few days, a week, 10 days of that order, provided they are medically fit and all the wherewithal available and the weapons are available. But there are other complex missions. For example, the missiles, what you call that, it's about a 300-400 kilometers range. So if we go for that, possibly we may not be ready with that. There is a certain, I mean, personally I say, because I won't know the status, but it takes a little bit more time to practice those so-called simulator and so on and so forth, and get those weapons ready. And there could be other complex missions where you call the swing role. That means you carry a lot of weapons, and then you say you're in air defense and you can drop the bombs and carry on with it. There are some complexities on that, and that they can probably, when they feel up to it, they'll do it, and so on. So it's a kind of it's a roll on. You start with something which they're very good, familiar with, and press on with that.
General Bikram Singh, as a former army man, what do you make of the fact that the Rafale fighter jet are now in the Indian Armada, as it were, the Indian Armed Forces stables? And what more do you believe needs to be done? Because ultimately, yes, we understand the jubilation, but these are 5 of 36, and that 36 is much lesser than our requirement of 124, which was identified way back in 2001. Since then, more squadrons have been phased out because they became antique, and we haven't really been able to keep up. General Bikram Singh.
Yes, Rahul, thank you for having me on the show, and my greetings to the two former chiefs. You mentioned as to the impact of this. Well, Rahul, it's a very valuable addition to our military inventory. Though we just got the 5 aircrafts as of now, but given their versatility, given their multi-role capability, it's going to have a force multiplication effect as far as our combat power is concerned. You are right, we need to get more, and sooner the better. But as brought out earlier, it's not before 2003. But then these 5 aircrafts, in concert with the inventory that we have of our aircrafts, I think we'll be able to do the needful on the battlefield. And let me tell you, soldiers, their morale, it really goes up when they see these, the fighter aircrafts thundering through the battlefield, our own aircrafts. It actually boosts the morale. And of course, as the Air Chief brought out, their utilization as far as the operations are concerned will be contingent on the end state that we are seeking. We at the moment have operations which are in the tactical domain. Is the nation prepared to go in for a full-fledged war? If that be so, then their application would be different. But in the present context, I think it's more, since we are in the deterrence and engagement stage of war fighting, I would say, or I would say the hostilities that have emerged. I think these will make a positive impact as far as deterrence is concerned on China. But ultimately, we got to get the full inventory of the aircrafts. 36 must come in. And preferably, if we can go back to the old number of 124 or 127, which you mentioned.
Admiral Suresh Mehta, do you agree with General Bikram Singh's assessment that this serves as deterrence, that the enemy on the other side of the Himalayas sees India flexing the muscles? Or there will be some cynics who will say there are just 5 of them. The Chinese will probably be laughing. Look at these Indians getting so excited about 5 aircraft that have shown up 2 decades too late.
I'll take that on. Kicha sir, firstly, heartiest congratulations for having taken this project through with all your hard work and all the difficult situations that we have always gone through by the ministries and the finances, etc., etc. Now, that having been said, let me tell you, no Air Force will induct 100 aircraft at the same time. It happens in batches everywhere. And nor can a factory produce so many aircraft at the same time. So we are in the queue. There are other customers also, I'm sure. And and certainly they will come as planned by the Air Force. Now, what is wrong with 5 aircraft? They are able to take that mission on from 1 week onwards, as Air Marshal told us just now, Air Chief Marshal. They are ready. The pilots have been trained with all their firing, etc. They must have done all kinds of drills over there in the training phase. And now it's just getting to, to get into the battlefield and take it on. So I don't think we need to be cynical about that. The fact, of course, is that neither can the finances be provided to you in such lump sum that go and pick up 100 aeroplanes and, here is the bag full of money. That's not how it works. So let it happen in peace. And I'm sure the airmen would also have been trained in the maintenance aspects of it. Now they will get hands-on to it, and within a 10 days time, everybody would be ticking
Now
along.
this is Air Chief Marshal Krishna Swamy, the biggest debate at this moment. India wants to buy new fighter jets. There is talk of a new tender being put out, but that basically involves all the weapon manufacturers coming in, going through trials. There will be some who will argue that given the posturing by China and Pakistan, which is openly hostile, and given the fact that we've already established a logistical and supply line, maintenance line for the Rafale, and now because the initial capex costs have been taken care of, we should just go ahead, expand this order from 36 to whatever we can afford to take it and get more squadrons of the Rafale itself. Would you push for an expedited purchase of additional Rafale, or should India go through the entire process, which may throw up the Rafale as the winner, or maybe one of the American or the Russian or any other country's fighters?
Rahul, I had gone through some very bad experience in the past. And as we started on the Rafale case, when it was in a very mature stage, they said, no, get a global tender. And then we spun backwards. Now, I have the fair amount of experience in struggling with coping with a variety of aeroplanes at different levels as a commander-in-chief and, of course, as a chief when aeroplanes were retiring, and you're trying to manage about a dozen types. About 6, 7 of them are retired now. And it's not an easy joke. It's not a joke running around for spares of a different kind from different manufacturer, and you have to get to the head of the state and that kind of a thing to get the help. So I feel that based on the confidence level of the chief and his senior staff, what their recommendations are, and most importantly, what their experiences are. I'm talking about the recent experiences. Now, it's very obvious. It's more cost effective from any sense of imagination that to have more different types, it'll be far more expensive and it'll be far more painful because we have to create a logistics centers right across the country. And there could be some weapons that this aeroplane carries, for example, that Sukhoi 30 won't carry. So do we have to position these kind of weapons at every corner of our country? It's very expensive.
No, you're right. But Admiral Suresh Mehta, the flip side to this, and you've been chief, so you know well, is domestic politics. Rahul Gandhi already taking pot shots saying, why are we buying something for 1500 crores, which I was willing to buy, which my government was willing to buy for 500 crores. This is NDA being taken for a ride. Prime Minister Modi is culpable. So all those broadsides would kick in if you go ahead and purchase more Rafale. Whereas if you go through a global tender, there is at least a pretense that you're going through all the norms, even if you don't end up with the best deal in the end.
We are not buying for the politicians, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
I hear you. That's a fair
just
point.
what also I'm saying the same thing. Leave it to the professionals. Our job is to select and to get the right thing. And we have more national pride than anybody else, than the money makers. And it is for them to provide the funds and not question why this one and why that. What does he know about whether it is an F-35 or a F whatever else, 8 or something. So leave that part to the professionals. Lot of work gets done when the files are put forward with all the, if somebody has the time to read, they will find all the logic over there. Why we are doing this and not doing that. All that is put across.
General Bikram Singh, is this one of your big bones with the Indian political system. The fact that, the Rafale purchase, for example, was, and that's one of the reasons why there's so much hype around the arrival of these Rafales, because it's been part of a very vexed political controversy. If that hadn't been the case, maybe there wouldn't have been as much public interest as there is in the arrival of the 5 jets. But that's also, whether it's the Bofors purchase or the Rafale purchase, there's so much political surround sound around it that the needs of the Air Force, the needs of the Army, the needs of the Navy, the needs of the fighting men, that's what suffers in the end, because they are Congress, BJP, opposition government playing politics.
No, I agree with the naval chief. He just brought it out that, it should be left to the military people, the military leadership. We understand what is required. We understand the GSQR. And once it is approved by the government, I think we should go ahead with it. And the other thing is, to cut short, because what happens is if you follow the laid down procedure, I've seen, a lot of these competitors throwing the spanner, when the acquisition process is on. But I think the best would be this G2G process, government to government process, where the government decides to buy a thing. Once it is approved, once it is decided, in the CCS, and they decide on a particular equipment, a platform, I think we should go ahead in the national interest. We should not leave it to, these politicians trying to derail certain initiatives. That is not in fitness of things. And especially when the national security is involved, I think we should go for it. And once a decision is taken, it must be upheld.
The reality is, and I want to make this point very emphatically, we have a very elaborate weapon purchase process, which delays every purchase so much so that when there is an emergency like there is now with China, we short circuit that process, junk it for what it's worth, and go ahead and buy at prices which are much costlier, because you're then trying to expedite that delivery, which basically means the process currently doesn't work. It needs to be looked at afresh. But I want to spend just one moment looking at the significance of the Ambala airbase, because this is India's oldest airbase, going back 100 years. And remember, it's seen action in 65 and 71 when it came under attack from the Pakistanis. And this is where the Golden Arrows will be based. So let's just, of all the air bases, why is it that the pride of the Indian Air Force at this moment, the latest Rafale fighter jets, will be located at Ambala? Our defense correspondent Abhishek Bhalla with this story.
The new flies into the old. India's vintage airbase receives the most modern French fighters. An incomparable intersection of the world's leading military craft and India's oldest airfield.
अंबाला का इम्पोर्टेंस बढ़ गया है जब 1979 ये कोइंसिडेंस है, जुलाई 27th को पहला जैगुआर वहाँ लैंड किया 41 years बैक, और मैं वहाँ था उस टाइम इसलिए कि मैं पहला स्क्वाड्रन जैगुआर में था.
A stunning moment in the 100-year history of Ambala's Air Force Station. Ambala's tryst with military aviation began a century ago. Back in 1919, an unpaved strip catered to a fleet of World War I Bristol fighter planes. 3 years later, the Ambala Air Base became the headquarters of Britain's Royal Air Force's India Command. Post-independence, this facility was attacked twice by Pakistan.
इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बहुत सारे हैं अम्बाला में, इसलिए कि जैगुआर्स वहीं आ गया था. अभी जैगुआर्स का वहाँ कितना साल हो गया, 40 साल. काफ़ी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है. इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ये नहीं कि खाली उन जहाज़ को रखने के लिए, जहाज़ को मेंटेन भी करना पड़ता है. हमारे जो वेपन सिस्टम्स आएंगे इसके साथ उनको एक स्पेशल मतलब एनवायरनमेंट में रखना पड़ेगा. आजकल का जहाज़ बहुत एडवांस टेक्नोलॉजी के है.
A testament to two full-blown wars in the Asian subcontinent in 1965 and 1971. Ambala's airbase has seen some of India's finest war heroes. In British India, then Flight Lieutenant Subrata Mukherjee became the first Indian officer to command a squadron here. The officer took over as Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Air Force in 1954. Then a group captain, Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjun Singh, took command of the Ambala Air Base immediately after independence. Flying officer Nirmaljit Singh Sekho served with the number 18 squadron at Ambala during the 1971 war with Pakistan. He was posthumously honoured with the highest gallantry award, the Paramveer Chakra, for his heroic air combat with enemy fighters at Srinagar. During the 1999 Kargil conflict, Jaguar fighters flew multiple sorties from Ambala for strategic missions. Ten months ago, then IAF Chief B.S. Dhanova resurrected the 17th Squadron, which he himself commanded during the Kargil conflict. These lethal new birds will be part of the same Golden Arrow Squadron.
The golden history of the Ambala Air Base will only get richer with the coming of the Rafale. And there are various reasons that have prompted the Indian Air Force to make this the operational base for India's newest military induction. Its strategic location ensures that it can launch operations quickly, be it at the western or the northern borders. And most importantly, its technical facilities, which also include a state-of-the-art air defense system, makes it the perfect home for Rafale. With camera person Anil Jaiswal, Abhishek Bhalla in Ambala for India Today.
While a lot of the hype has been around these mean machines, we now tell you about the men who flew these Rafale 7,000 kilometers from Mérignac in France to Ambala in India, headed by Group Captain Harkirat Singh. The Golden Arrows have pilots drawn from all across our country. Here's a report about the men who make up the number 17 Squadron of the Indian Air Force.
Flying Tigers. Their roaring touchdown. Meet the IAF pilots who flew in the lethal Rafales. Group Captain Harkirat Singh, Wing Commander M.K. Singh, Wing Commander Abhishek Tripathi, Group Captain Rohit Kataria, Wing Commander Sidhu, Wing Commander Manish and Wing Commander Arun flew the Rafale down from France. This proud team is led by Group Captain Harkirat Singh, the commanding officer of the 17th Squadron, also the Golden Arrows at Ambala Air Base, which the Rafales will be part of. A decorated officer awarded the Shaurya Chakra for his feat in 2008 when, during an emergency, he not only saved his aircraft but also ensured no lives were lost. Commissioned in 2001, Group Captain Singh will be the first commanding officer of the new Rafale Squadron. Air Commodore Hilal Ahmad Rathar from Anantnag in Kashmir played a key role in the quick delivery of the first batch of Rafale jets and their weaponizing. He is also India's air attaché to France.
कश्मीर के लिए, जम्मू के लिए, लद्दाख के लिए या पूरे हिंदुस्तान के लिए ये फ़ख्र का दिन है। जो तमन्नाएं उनके वालिद साहब की, उनके फैमिली में तमन्नाएं थी, उन्होंने आज पूरा किया।
Wing Commander Abhishek Tripathi belongs to Jalore in Rajasthan. An NDA graduate, he joined the IAF in 2001 as a flying officer.
हम लोगों को तो इतना बढ़िया महसूस हो रहा है कि जो कुछ कहा नहीं जा सकता है। हम लोग खुशी का, हमारे लोगों खुशी का कोई ठिकाना नहीं है। कि आज हमारा भतीजा यहाँ पे पहुँचा है, सारा देश उसको देख रहा है, सारी दुनिया उसको देख रही है।
Group Captain Rohit Kataria's grandfather was emotional when he saw his grandson flying the Rafales home.
राफेल विमान उड़ा के लेके आ रहा है, कैसा फील हो रहा है आपको?
बहुत खुशी है, बहुत ज़्यादा।
Wing Commander Manish Singh is also a product of the NDA. He joined the Indian Air Force in 2003.
जी, कितना खुशी है आपको?
अब दुनिया को खुशी है तो हमको क्या पूछना है?
A historic arrival for the nation's safer future. Bureau Report, India Today.
The pride in the eyes of each of those relatives, their Chief Marshal Krishna Swamy, it just makes your heart swell with pride, and also seeing the kind of humble background some of these air warriors come from, to having been selected after a very rigorous process to be amongst the test fighter pilots for bringing back a new squadron. Can you explain, as somebody who's served his entire life in the Air Force, what it takes to be one of the pilots who's brought the Rafale back, and how special this is for an Air Force pilot's career?
It's a family, that's how we feel. One of the difficult parts of it is that people shift squadrons, every few years or so. And so this kind of a feeling spreads all around, and therefore there is the level of camaraderie that we feel is phenomenal. And the same way is that the love of our men. And when we all rush into the aircraft and rush into the cockpit, many times we tend to forget something, some switches or the other. They are extremely watchful, and they care a great deal. And they'll come and say, "Sir, aapne ye to bhul gaye ho." They sometimes they're quite stern about it. And we learn a lot from working with each other. And there are emotional issues which happen now and then when we lose somebody or somebody is injured. That way, there is one thing I want to share, Rahul. The fighter team is sometimes it's very unforgiving. That is like when we go to war, you take off from Ambala or from faraway place, and then like this old Canberra went all the way to Karachi, and then we lose an aeroplane, and that's it. You go from a lovely, comfortable house or whatever that is at a station, and there you are, the bullets flying all right across, and then you come back, and it's unreal, really. So you got to get used to this cycle of comfort and then the extreme so-called stress levels. And when you lose somebody, when you come back, I had this experience in '65. You come back to your room, your next bed is going to be empty because that person hasn't come back. So these are some of those things that we face. That's very typical in the so-called the aviators' experiences.
And you'll accept, General Bikram Singh, that to strut as it were when you're walking up or walking out of a fighter jet is really the dream of virtually every military man, even if he's in the army or in the navy. To be a top line fighter pilot is something which everyone in the armed forces really dreams about or is hugely envious about, even if that's not their dream.
That's true, Rahul. It's a desire of every military man, irrespective of the service he belongs to. And especially, when we pass out from NDA, we all train together. It's only, later on in the last 2 terms of yours that you start training for your specific, service that you're going to. And then from there you go to, various academies of yours. And I've had the pleasure of flying the Sukhoi when I was the Eastern Army commander. And I think it's everyone's dream. And I must thank the Air Force for that opportunity. And since I suppose you're coming to a closure of all this thing, I must congratulate the Air Chief. He's brought it out beautifully as to what the desire of every pilot is and the kind of stress levels they go through. I mean, they're phenomenal. We in the Army, of course, we have very high levels of stress while we are on the battlefield, especially, the proxy war arena where we've been fighting for a number of decades now. There are very high stress levels, but I think after listening to the Air Chief, I can understand, I can fathom that the stress levels for a pilot and his colleagues are tremendous again.
Not just Air Chief Marshal, look, reflexes need to be super sharp. Can you explain how being a fighter pilot and what it takes to be a successful fighter pilot has changed from the time when you first sat in a cockpit to now? The skills, the mental makeup, the psyche, the weapon systems, how they've undergone a massive transformation over these decades?
I was just over 22 when I participated in the 1965 war, and we were at Ambala, that's my base, and we were flown down to Pathankot, and within 24 hours we were up there and flying into Sialkot, and I was flying the NAT, and the NAT had a very simple system. It had just 2 guns and nothing else. So in all that we were told is it had no radar. So all we were told is you just go there and climb to 20,000 feet and shoot down some Pakistanis and come back. Yes, I mean, truly it happened. We were 6 of us and we went up and we just patrolled that area. I thought to myself, what cheek, yeah? I mean, it was crazy, At the end of it, we don't know. Some radars saying this, that, the other. At that time, we didn't have enough radars. And I'm not giving any storytelling, but on that day, in the combat, we lost 1 person. And we all came back, and all that we had stayed in that base was, we landed in the evening, 6 o'clock, and 4 o'clock in the morning, we were at the briefing. And 6 o'clock, we took off, and we lost one person in that. By 7, and when we came for breakfast, there was 1 person less. So, and the system was very simple, and the NAT cockpit was very tight, and all that you did had to put some circuit breakers. So you had to just move your elbow, and so that click, you heard a click, and that's it. And then you started and you zoomed. Then we went on to, I did the evaluation of Mirage 2000 in France before it was brought here, and I did the entire work of Sukhoi 30. I mean, the complexities are extreme changes, and it's what we call it the all singing, dancing cockpit. If you take a Mirage 2000, it makes a few funny noises. Then like you make a computer game, some pings and so on and so forth, cautioning and telling you, prompting you, and it flies so beautifully, and it's remarkable. And the Sukhoi 30 is a huge monster. It carries 9 tons of fuel, and you're sitting on an aeroplane which is 29 tons. It is heavier than an AN-26, the twin-engine transport aircraft all of us have seen. And it is a combat aircraft. You get into 8-9 Gs on that. And it's remarkable, and you fly very long distance, and you have to empty the bladder. You have to carry a little pack there. So it's a total transformation now. And the other is that the only one thing I want to add is the support we have has changed remarkably. For example, the radar. When you fly from Cape Comorin to Kashmir, you're continually in contact, you're speaking to somebody. It wasn't so.
Okay.
You flew across half this country without being able to speak to anybody. And if you have any problem, you don't know where to yell. I mean, there is no help. And here, they're all the time watching you. And it's very different.
Air Chief Marshal Krishnaswamy, I realize how emotional a moment this is, not just for you as an air warrior, but for everyone in the Indian Air Force. And you've been personally involved in the whole process of moving the files. It's like all those files finally leading to these Rafale fighter jets coming in. You've shared the joys and the travails of being an Air Force fighter pilot. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that this in public imagination creates the need and pushes through the requirement for more fighter jets. 5 is too few, even 36 isn't enough. The Indian Air Force needs many more. The sanctioned squadron strength is 42. We're down currently at 30. That will come down to 26. India needs to upgrade its air fighting capabilities very, very substantially. We're making some progress, but a lot more needs to be done. General Bikram Singh, Admiral Suresh Mehta, Air Chief Marshal Krishna Swamy, I enjoyed every single second of this conversation. I thank you, gentlemen, for taking out time and joining me on the Newstrack.